In this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know regarding the driving on the tracks in the Special Cup. As always, we're going over the shroomless lines, the shortcuts and driving strats, and the coin routes. I'll have the timestamps for each track in the description. Also, I've decided that if coins are just barely outside the tight lines used on these tracks, I'm just going to pick them up since you'll barely lose any time for doing so in a tight pack. But without further ado, let's start giving her, bud. Just before getting started, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. It's free. It helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind. Starting things off, we have Cloudtop Cruise. Shortly after the race begins, you want to perform a right drift before the first boost ramp and stay as tight as possible, as I do here. As the boost ramp is in a straight line for your character, release your mini turbo immediately into a left soft drift, which you want to hold until just before landing on the balloon. This is where you want to perform the super bounce technique. So release your mini turbo and trick off the balloon the same way you would perform any mini turbo trick. And yeah, it's a lot faster than performing a regular trick off the balloon. When you land on the cloud section of the track, you can do a slide or two to position yourself safely, but generally speaking, you want to begin a right drift shortly after landing. There's a bit of a bump here, so what I like to do is perform a left hop on the very right of the bump. I'm not entirely sure if this is faster or not, but it does feel nice. Anyways, you'll get some airtime, and once you land, you could do a right slide before tricking off the cloud ramp or drive forward. By sliding, you may have a better shot at getting a better trick off the balloon, but in any case, trick off the cloud ramp and the balloon, and you'll get a good launch forward. Once again, as you land, you can do a slide or two if you'd like, or begin a right drift immediately. But yeah, begin a right drift, and as you get around the turn, you want to release your super mini turbo into a neutral hop, then hold right, then perform a right trick off the ramp. You'll get a bit more of a launch forward when you do this, and it's much faster than simply releasing your super mini turbo into a trick. Anyway, once you land, you may have to do a small left slide just to reposition yourself safely, and shortly after, begin a left drift. As you get around the turn, you want to release your mini turbo immediately into a right drift just before you touch the second coin. You want to soft drift for the most part, and as you land on the path before the cannon glider, release your mini turbo into a left hop. You can do a few neutral hops if you'd like, but the only hop that counts is the one right before the cannon glider to get the fast glider. While you're on this glider section, you want to hold both forward and left to aim down, and as the anti-gravity sound effect plays and you slow down, shift your stick to holding back and ever so slightly to the left. You'll get some extra air time, but just so that the glider doesn't stick around for too long, you should hold forward for a split second to land. By doing this, you can easily transition into a left soft drift. Soft drift as much as you can before holding wide, and as soon as you can, release your mini turbo into a right hop, into a neutral hop, into a left drift. Now, the boost panel shocker section does have a pattern to it, but I'll generalize the pattern you should look for on all laps while front running eventually. For now, let's focus on lap 1. You want to hold wide on your left drift as you go over the first boost panel. Just before going over the second boost panel on the right, release your mini turbo into a right hop, go over the boost panel, then perform another right hop into a left drift. It's vital that you soft drift where you can here. Anyway, hold wide just as you're about to hit the wall and go over the third boost panel. The wall should bump you far enough to the point where you can go over the fourth boost panel. From here, you'll probably want to commit to one last big push to soft drift to charge an ultra mini turbo. Hold wide as you're about to collide with the wall, and it should push you wide enough to make the ultra mini turbo glider worth it. Remember, you don't want to low glider here. This is a spot where the more air you have, the faster you go. That's at least how it is when you trick off the glider ramp, so just keep that in mind. I'm not a time trial expert, so I could be wrong for the ultra mini turbo glider. As your ultra mini turbo boost is still active, you want to hold both back and right for maximum profit and the best possible vector. After your boost runs out, you can just land naturally, and after that, the ending is pretty simple. Perform a right drift as you land on the vine, get a mini turbo trick and a regular trick over the shortcut, and the finish line is right in front of you. Putting it all together, chain 2 mini turbos to start, with the second one being released to land a super bounce. Perform a right drift after you land and release it into a left hop into 2 tricks. Begin another right drift shortly after landing and release that into a neutral hop while holding right into a trick. Chain 2 mini turbos around the right path and remember to hop just before the cannon glider. Hold forward for the most part and hold back as you slow down. Charge up a quick mini turbo as you land and release it into another right drift. Drift over the boost panel, release your mini turbo into 2 right hops into a left drift while going over the second boost panel, bump into the wall on the third boost panel, drift over the fourth boost panel, and bump into the wall again over the final boost panel. Just after landing, begin a right drift, perform a mini turbo trick and a regular trick, and it's just another day in the office for you. I don't have much to say here because the only shortcut to go over is part of the shroomless lines. But here are the lines you could take on the alternate paths. Additionally, here's what the boost panel shocker section looks like on lap 2. And here's what it looks like on lap 3. This is mainly when you're front running, but you'll understand this section of the track more and more as you gain that full throttle experience. This track is alright for coin collecting, as you can collect up to 6 coins while front running. It's not too bad. Thankfully, you do have some alternatives where you can quickly up your coin count. You have the wide coins at the beginning, the coins beside the second balloon, the wide 3 coins before the airship, the coin on the left path, the 3 possible coins you can collect on the anti-gravity section, and the 3 wide coins on the wide path. So yeah, this is a pretty solid track for coins, but that's about all there is to Cloudtop Cruise. So let's get her going on Bone Dry Dunes. Bone Dry Dunes is a pretty basic track for the most part, but there are still some neat things you can do here. Right after the race begins, you want to begin a right drift. Soft drift as you're on the turn and release a super mini turbo into a left hop. This beginning is pretty basic for the most part. Drive straight until it's reasonable for you to begin a right drift. Hold wide for the most part and release your mini turbo just after passing the coins into a left hop into a left drift. As you get around the turn, release your mini turbo into a right hop into a right drift. Stay as tight as possible while drifting around the turn, then release your super mini turbo immediately into a left drift. Release your mini turbo as soon as you can get around the turn and trick off the ramp as soon as you can, positioning yourself toward the second left coin. Begin a right drift as soon as you land. This section of the track can be a bit bumpy, and the off-road does not really help here, so just take that into account. You want to soft drift for the most part while staying tight and release your super mini turbo just before driving on the straight. If you do this, you'll easily be able to collect the 3 coins here. These coins can be really hard to collect sometimes though, so you may find it best to play it safe and just release your super mini turbo on the straight rather than just before it. Anyway, begin a right drift just before collecting the first coin. You'll have a bump to go over, but either way, release your mini turbo on the anti-gravity straight. This section is really easy. Just drive straight, use the spin boosters, and trick off the ramps. As you land from the second ramp, begin a left soft drift before the glider. Release your mini turbo into a right trick off the glider and position yourself toward the remainder of the track. You could do some fancy vector shenanigans here if you'd like, but I don't know much about those, so I won't suggest anything here. Anyway, begin a left drift as soon as you land and release your super mini turbo as soon as you get it. Begin a final left drift a bit before the final turn, and whenever you don't have to hold wide, soft drift as much as you can, and hopefully you can release an ultra mini turbo before the finish line. On lap 3 is just a super mini turbo. Altogether, begin a right drift right away and release a super mini turbo on the next straight. Begin another right drift a bit after and perform some mini turbos and hops around this generally straight section. Begin a right drift as you approach the next turn and release a super mini turbo into a left drift. Release your mini turbo and trick off the ramp. Begin a right drift as soon as you land and release your super mini turbo on the following straight, followed by another right drift and release your mini turbo on the anti-gravity straight. Hit some spin boosters and trick off the ramps and begin a left soft drift after the second ramp, which you'll release as you trick off the glider ramp. Land back on the track and begin a left drift immediately, in which you'll release a super mini turbo on the second last straight. Begin a final left drift around the last turn and charge up an ultra mini turbo, release it on the final straight, and yeah, you're yeehawing there, bud! You have quite a few shortcuts and driving strats here. First and foremost, the beginning cut. While you can easily shroom through it, you can also make it shroomless. The safe method simply involves charging up a super mini turbo and releasing it as you land in the off-road. However, the fast method involves releasing a regular mini turbo as you hop into the off-road and quickly hopping out. I wouldn't recommend the fast method online, and I wouldn't recommend taking the shortcut in any scenario in general, since you skip an item box while not saving enough time to make it worthwhile. You also have this little off-road cut, which can help you a bit, and you can land an additional trick as well. Now, the only scenarios I can imagine this being worth it in is if you are trying to space from the pack or want to lose time to get shocked. Either way, the wide path. This is how you drive it, but in almost every case, just take the anti-gravity path. Next up, by tricking on the right of the glider ramp and maintaining a neutral stick until you notice you have enough air to land up top, you can take the top path with ease. This can really help you if you need another item, as you can't get one by taking the bottom path. This is where the true final set is. Finally, the ending shortcut. This shortcut can be a little awkward when just learning it optimally, but you'll get a bit of a bump up before landing in the off-road in most cases. If you shroom after this point, you'll have next to no chance of the off-road catching you by surprise and screwing you over. It's a bit of a weird one for sure, but with some practice, you'll get it down pretty easily. This track is not the greatest for coin collecting. You can collect up to 5 coins by taking tight lines, and most other options require you to go well out of your line. Either way, you have the 2 dropped coins at the start, the 3 coins on the left of the plant, the wide path coins, the 3 wide coins after the glider, and the coins on the top path. So yeah, it can be a little tough to collect a ton of coins if you're struggling. So just don't get hit, forehead. But that's Bone Dry Dunes for you. Let's keep up the pace on Bowser's Castle. Bowser's Castle is a pretty fun track to drive. The start of the race is nothing too special, just trick off the ramp and call it a day. You want to begin a right drift as soon as you land, or a little later, whatever you're most comfortable with without losing time. As you get around the first turn, release your mini turbo immediately into a left drift off the staircase. You want to soft drift for the most part while staying as tight as you can, and release an ultra mini turbo into a right hop as you go over the anti-gravity strip. Just drive straight, and as the track curves upwards, begin a left drift. Now, just before continuing, it's worth mentioning that you can get an early glimpse of where the hanging spiked ball is at, and where it could be swinging if you can see well enough. It may or may not be of use to you. In any case, as you approach the first anti-gravity ramp, release your mini turbo into a right hop and trick. This isn't a bad spot to shake your controller just to guarantee a trick as well. As you land, perform a left hop and trick off the second ramp, then begin a left drift as soon as you land. Try to stay as tight as you can while charging up a super mini turbo, and as you're about to be on the straight before the split path, release your super mini turbo and perform a left hop into a left trick. This will give you a bit of a launch forward, which will save some time. In general, the path you take doesn't matter a whole lot, but you do have a lot of wiggle room for maximum optimization on the right path, so we'll take that path. You want to position yourself toward the left side of the path, and try not to mash your trick button or constantly shake your controller here, because you might only get one trick that really counts. By calculating your tricks and shaking or pressing R more slowly, you'll have a better shot at getting 2 solid tricks. As you land from the second trick, perform a right slide into a left drift over the boost panel. Soft drift where you can, and as you get around the following turn, release your super mini turbo into a right hop into a left drift. While it looks rather weird here, just do these inputs and you'll be good to go either way. As you approach the second coin, hold a consistent soft drift, then hold wide shortly after getting around the turn. You may need to optimize a bit, but as long as you bump into the wall, you should be good to go. At this point, continue to hold wide, then press R or ZR after going off the glider to low glider. You can do some vector shenanigans by holding right and forward for a bit, then holding back, but it's not fully necessary. Either way, land early and begin a left soft drift. Release your mini turbo as soon as you get it into a right hop into a right drift. At this point, just hold on to your drift and charge up an ultra mini turbo, release it on the final straight, and it's just another day in the office. To summarize, trick off the first ramp and begin a right drift immediately. Release your mini turbo immediately into a left drift on the staircase. Charge up an ultra mini turbo, release it, and drive straight until the upward curve, where you'll begin a left drift. Release a mini turbo before the ramp and trick off both ramps, beginning a left drift as soon as you land. Release a super mini turbo and perform a launched trick off the ramp, positioning yourself toward the right path. Nail 2 solid tricks and charge up a super mini turbo on the following turn. Release it and begin another left drift, charge up an ultra mini turbo, and release it in low glider fashion. Begin a left drift as you land, release your mini turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into another right drift. Charge up an ultra mini turbo and release it on the final straight, and you're yeehawn on Bowser's Castle. If you happen to take the left path, there's a good chance you could chain a ton of tricks. On top of that, you could also get a big trick over the gap as shown here. While this is cool, as far as I know, it isn't faster to release an ultra mini turbo over the glider on this path. Even if it is, it's a lot less convenient than on the right path, so just keep that in mind. And of course, there's the ending shortcut. Nothing too special here, just stay as tight as possible and release the ending ultra mini turbo like you would if you weren't taking the ending shortcut. One last thing to mention is that you can charge up a mini turbo and release it into a trick at the beginning. While this is faster, especially on Scooty, do not do this on lap 1. It's not worth it and you'll likely get bumped pretty badly. Now, this track is all but generous for coin collecting. While you do skip a few coins that aren't crazy wide, you can only collect up to 4 coins by driving like you have 10 coins. As you should, however, you do have other options. You have the 3 beginning coins, the coin before the ramps, the wide 2 or 3 coins, the left path coins, and the really wide 3 coins at the end. Unfortunately, it's super difficult to collect a ton of coins in a short amount of time on this track, so you gotta make do with what you got. That's all there is to say regarding Bowser's Castle though. Let's finish the job on Rainbow Road. I'm not particularly fond of Rainbow Road in this game, but that's just my opinion. You can do some cool things here too. Right after the race starts, you want to begin a right drift around the first turn. Charge up a mini turbo and release it into a left hop into a left drift. Do the same thing here, except into a right hop into a right drift. The next turn is really tight, so while collecting the coins, if you notice you're starting to get out of a tight line, tap the B button every now and then to brake drift. I usually do about 3 consecutive taps as I touch the second coin. As you get around the turn, release your ultra mini turbo immediately into a left drift. Soft drift as you approach the 2 coins and hold wide on the straight before the glider. Now, I'm not sure if it's faster to low glider here or not, but if you do want to collect some coins, it will be much easier to do so by low gliding. You want to hold back for the most part and position yourself a little left of the following ramp and trick. As you land, perform a left slide into a right drift and soft drift as tight as possible. Release your super mini turbo on the next straight and position yourself toward the right cannon glider. Now, this can be a little difficult because of the boost panel sometimes, but because this is a cannon glider, hop right before the glider ramp to get the fast glider. While on this glider section, you want to hold back and slightly left, and as you slow down, hold forward. Begin a right drift as soon as you land and release a super mini turbo on the following straight. As you approach this black line, begin a right drift, run into the spin booster, and soft drift off the track. You'll land on the other path, in which you'll release a super mini turbo into a left hop, and shortly after into a left drift. You can hold wide for the most part and release your mini turbo into a right hop or slide into a left drift. You'll have to brake drift around this turn as well. I'd say the Q would be in between these 2 black lines and tap the B button about 3 to 4 times. Release your ultra mini turbo on the straight, perform a right drift into a mini turbo if you'd like, and you're giving her full throttle. Point blank period. Adding it all up, begin a right drift and release a mini turbo into a left drift, and do the same here but into a right drift. Brake drift around the tight turn and release an ultra mini turbo immediately into a left drift. Release your ultra mini turbo over the glider in low or regular glider fashion. Trick off the ramp and begin a right drift as tight as possible, and release a super mini turbo before the cannon glider. Don't forget to hop just before it. Hold back, then forward as you slow down, and begin a right drift as soon as you land. Release a super mini turbo and begin a right soft drift over the path switch. Release a super mini turbo and begin a left drift shortly after. Release that mini turbo into a left drift, do some brake drifting where necessary, release your ultra mini turbo on the final straight, and yeah, you're simply doing what has to be done. There isn't too much to talk about here regarding the shortcuts and the driving strats. As for the glider, you do have a super mini turbo into a mini turbo off the glider as an alternative for coin collecting. And this is what the regular ultra mini turbo glider looks like. Again, I don't know which is faster, but the low glider is generally safer online. And of course, the off-road shortcut. You can't miss this, and it can help you quite a bit in any situation, really. Now, unlike the other 3 tracks in this cup, this track is actually very generous with coins. You can easily collect up to 10 coins when driving tight, which is awesome. While you do have minimal alternatives, that doesn't really matter here. Either way, you have the 4 wide coins on the first big turn, and the 3 wide coins on the following turn. You also have numerous coins next to some of those in the tight lines, but that's about it. It's not worth it to stay on one path after the cannon glider for an extra coin or 2. You'll just lose a ton of time. But with that, we're done with Rainbow Road and the Special Cup driving. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be uploading the Special Cup strategies next week as per usual, so look forward to that. As for this week, I'll only be uploading one video between now and Friday, but I think you guys will really like it. Hell, even I love it a ton, and that means something because I really like all of my videos and I don't talk about that too much. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.